ਸਤਲੁਜ ਟੀਵੀ ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ। ਮੈਂ ਹਾਂ ਸੁਰਿੰਦਰ ਸਿੰਘ, ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਆਪਣਾ ਅਜੀਜ਼। ਤੇ ਫੀਨਿਕਸ ਦੇ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਸਟੂਡੀਓ ਤੋਂ ਮੈਂ ਬੋਲ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਤੇ ਅੱਜ ਸਾਡੇ ਮਹਿਮਾਨ ਨੇ ਇੱਕ ਖਾਸ ਸ਼ਖਸੀਅਤ। ਅੱਜ ਭਾਵੇਂ ਉਹ ਸਾਡੇ ਦਰਮਿਆਨ ਮਹਿਮਾਨ ਨੇ, ਪਰ ਅੱਗੇ ਉਹ ਮੇਜ਼ਬਾਨ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਸਤਲੁਜ ਟੀਵੀ ਲਈ। ਯੂਕੇ ਤੋਂ ਸਤਲੁਜ ਦੇ ਬਿਊਰੋ ਹੈਡ ਐਂਗਸ ਸਕਾਟ ਅੱਜ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਟੂਡੀਓ 'ਚ ਮੌਜੂਦ ਨੇ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ। ਵੈਲਕਮ ਟੂ ਆਲ ਦਾ ਵਿਊਅਰਸ ਆਫ Satluj TV. I am Surinder Singh. Today we will introduce you to a special guest. The person here in the studio with me is the guest today, but usually he is the host. His name is Angus Scott. Angus Scott is a senior journalist and he has been doing journalism on political and economic issues. Angus Scott is the UK bureau head of Satluj TV and producing news content for the Satluj network. So today we will talk about the difficulties he is facing, particularly working with Satluj and his reporting on the transnational repression. So welcome in the studio, Angus.
Thank you very much, Surinder. It's been an absolute pleasure to join you here in the studio at last.
How are you feeling in US?
Great, it's great to be here. I mean, obviously we've been communicating a lot remotely, which is one thing, but it's great to meet the team. We've got such a great team here, and I've met every part of the team, and yeah, it gives me a huge amount of confidence meeting the people here and knowing just how capable they all seem, and of course the very professional setup that we have here. It's given me a huge amount of confidence, because of course in the UK I'm an awful long way away from here, and I'm remote. You know, our bureau in Europe is an outpost of the head office. So being here and meeting the headquarters, it's given me a lot of. I feel very supported in what I do. Sometimes it can feel lonely, but certainly I feel very supported, which is appreciated.
Thank you very much. Tell us something about yourself and your journey of journalism. How and when you start active journalism?
It's been I would say a very long and strange journey. I've done a very non-traditional route into becoming or sitting in the seat, because I had 35 years in industry. When I left university a long time ago, I was in the property industry, the commercial investment property industry for 10 years. I then did 25, nearly 30 years in the oil industry, where I worked all over the world. I worked a lot in West Africa, in China, in the States. I was a regular visitor to Houston. And it was during that period, it was a very exciting career, and I saw a lot of the world, but I've always had a very deep interest in current affairs. And travelling the world has allowed me to visit a lot of very interesting countries and become very acquainted with a lot of international affairs, but also to get exposed to very many different and varied cultures, which has always been very interesting and eye-opening. And of course my career, it reached, I would say, its peak in industry about 6-7 years ago. And I was fortunate enough to have a company which I then sold, which put me in a position to be able to choose what I really wanted to do. And I've always wanted to be a journalist. And with an industry background on the marketing commercial side, I've spent my life in front of audiences, delivering presentations, preparing papers, delivering papers, and doing a lot of research. So it was a very easy move into what I'm doing now. So it's to become specifically a journalist. It was a lot of stepping stones. I did a lot of work just in the general media, but I was then increasingly, because of course my strengths were delivering news items and researching news and current affairs and very interesting topics that were very relevant at any given time. I was then naturally picked by clients who wanted to use my skills on the economic side, the finance side, and of course current affairs. So I was almost naturally channeled into, well, it was when you guys then came into my life and fortunately recognised the skills that I have, and it was just a very instant fit. It was as soon as I got to understand the issues that you guys are trying to bring to the world, it resonated very deeply with me. And I've always had a very natural interest in India and Indian affairs. I've always loved India and the people and the culture, and so it was almost meant to be. It was almost the universe has put all the right pieces in place, and I ended up working for Satluj, and it's been a very interesting, very pleasurable journey, I have to say. I feel now I'm at the peak of my career. This is
Thank you very much. Every journalist is a journalist because he has the idea to change this world for next generations, to make this world better for the next generations. What do you think about today's journalism? Is it according to the measures of journalism, or it's something different happening around the world, particularly in India?
Yeah, this is a very big area, and it's I think very relevant to what we do. Journalism has existed for as long as the printed word has existed, and it has evolved, and we live in a very different world now. We live in a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week, 365 days a year world.
Very hectic,
where,
yeah.
And people's attention spans are very short, and the audience is very hungry and very demanding, and if you don't meet that demand, they switch off when they're away. That's the platform that within which we have to operate and survive and deliver our message. But also the job about being a journalist. Is it a job? Is it a vocation? Is it a passion? I think for many people in the industry, it's just a job. They enjoy it, but it's just a job. And I think if you are doing general current affairs, you are moving around, leaving different topics to move on to the next, and you're never attached to one specific topic. What I do here, and what we do specifically, is we are looking at a very important area, which is India, which is the Punjab. We are focusing on one particular area, and because of that, and why I'm actually sitting here, and why I hope to continue to sit here, is because for me it's not a job, it's actually become a passion. Because when I first started, it was a very big learning curve. I had an awful lot of research to do because I'd had a good understanding of India and its general affairs. But in the West, we get a very small snapshot of India. We only see what we are told through our media. And the West, I think, has a very cosy, comfortable image of India. It's almost, we remember Gandhi, the peaceful movements, we think of yoga, we think of the very spiritual side of India, of course the cuisine.
At the first side, you can see all these things here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But when you start to uncover the layers, as I have had to do, it's a very, very different story. There are so many layers to India. Of course, the politics of India are hugely complicated and complex, but it's not just the politics, it's the history, the heritage. And for me, as the more I've become involved, the more I've learned, the more people I've spoken to in the community, the more I've learned to understand just how significant what happened in 1947 is even today, not just even 1947, it's what happened 200 years ago, 250 years ago. And it's uncovered for me a hugely rich history that's had its highs, it's had its terrible lows, it's had some really tragic events, but it's also had some great heroic events as well. The story is so rich in excitement and interest. It's really sucked me into it, and I've become very passionate about the issues that we talk about. But it's also there's a huge sense of injustice, and this appeals to the British. And again, this is a very big area, and it's a very, very sensitive area because the history between Britain and India is a huge history, as we know, and it's not all good, but it's not all bad. And we go back to colonial times. Yeah, there is a long history of that, but there's also there is a deep connection between the Sikh community and the British because of what happened. The Sikh Empire that existed, the British Army, two very proud armies that came together. And out of that came a really interesting, deep relationship that has existed to today. And yeah, there were a lot of bad things that happened. We can't certainly brush those under the carpet. But our generation, the new generations, in the modern world, there's this very deep liberal movement where we have to feel this guilt, particularly in the West, the colonial guilt. And I've said to many people, okay, yeah, bad things happened, but that was the past. My generation are not responsible for that. These are people I didn't know that happened to people that the victims at the time, or so the young generation now, don't know. We're all a new generation, and we actually have a responsibility to put the past behind us, but not forget it, to learn from it, and to build the bridges, to learn from the lessons that we've learned. And I come back to this word injustice, because now, when I come at the issues that we talk about with fresh Western eyes, I won't say objective, because they're not objective. My opinions have been shaped and formed by Western media, by a narrative that I am fed. Of course, our minds make decisions based on the information that we are fed. I have had to go through all the research I can find and read as much as I can about the Sikh story. And I've been able to create, I hope, a very balanced view of what has happened. And through that, there's one word that always comes up, it's injustice. I feel this deep sense of injustice that has happened over a long period of time, not just caused by the British, but caused by India, and all sorts of different elements. And I have felt almost a responsibility with my generation as a British person to say, okay, my ancestors, they did some bad things, and I keep saying they did bad, they also did good, but they did bad things, and I feel I have a responsibility now to try and do what I can to change things for the better, to solve this injustice, to bring what little weight I carry, but to bring my weight to help you guys in the community make things happen that you want to rectify past mistakes and past injustices. So I get very engaged, not just engaged, I get very passionate about what we do. And all the guests that I speak to, I get this deep passion, but emotion. The whole story is very emotional because it has so deeply affected so many people over current generations. The current generation is impacted by what's happened in the 1980s and 1990s. And I feel that emotion coming from the guests that I talk to. And it builds in me this reciprocating, this responding passion, saying, actually, I now have a responsibility. I've heard your stories. My responsibility now is to go out and spread this message, is to try and change things from my way. And we talk about legacy. You talk about legacy. I would love that my legacy, in my own small way, is that I play a part in changing the world, in changing things, in making things happen back in India, in the Punjab, is making the goals that we're all aiming for happen. If I can achieve that, I will feel that I have really left a mark on this world in my own little way.
No words. You're a warrior. Great. Very good. I'm speechless.
Good. It's not often that happens, but
yeah. Any difficulties you faced during you produced content for Satluj, particularly on Sikh issues and on Indian politics?
Yeah, it's as I have discovered, and when I referred to earlier about peeling back the layers of India, there is a very dark side to India, which has shocked me, because again, I originally saw India as, and particularly Narendra Modi, as what I thought was a very benign figure. He comes across on the media as this very nice old grandfather figure. It's, you warm to him, you feel you should like him. But the more I research and the more people I talk to, and as I try to research my stories and the articles that I produce, I've discovered this very dark and actually, frankly, scary side to India that I'm now just touching, that I know the community, the Sikh community, has obviously experienced firsthand in a very big way. I'm now starting to see what the Sikh community has been suffering from a very long time. And it's a very multi-layered problem. What I do is I see it at a very almost superficial way. When I'm trying to research stories, I'm finding it very difficult to find the truth. And this opens up a big topic, because how do we get the truth from India? And of course, what I've discovered is the media in India is totally controlled. It is a government, it is a centrally controlled machine. It is very difficult to go to the Indian media and get a balanced story. In fact, you only get a government-controlled narrative. Now, for somebody who sees journalism, the responsibility of a journalist is to tell the truth, is to send a message that informs people about the truth. It's very, I find this very hostile to what I do. And a statistic or a figure that I regularly reproduce, because it shocks me as it has many people, India is the 161st country out of 183 in the Free Press Index. It does not have a free press. It's only just above North Korea. We all hold up North Korea as almost a joke as a country with its media. But India is only a few places above this. And I get attacked. When I raise this point, I get attacked for saying, this is not true. No, it is true. It is being objectively assessed by an independent global body. They have no interest in saying this. There's no vested interest for them to say this. But they say they have looked at it objectively, and they have discovered that this is the case. India is in a terrible situation. Journalists are not free to speak their mind, to write their articles, to send their messages that may criticise the government, that may criticise India, that holds the government to account. And one of the big responsibilities...
Even the journalists reporting from outside of India, even also not safe.
Yeah, and this is it. And this is what really shocks me. It's one thing to talk about India, and the stories I see in India are shocking. It's people outside India that are now facing this army, this secret army, online and even in the real world, where anybody who's trying to get a contrary message out to the audience, particularly in India, are shut down. They're silenced. I've got so many pieces of evidence where articles written, stories talked about have been closed down, have been shut down by this army that comes out of India, that is terrified of the message coming out, of a contrary message. So they do anything they can, and we've seen it with so many news outlets that we talk to, that we have good relations with. When they produce articles, they're fined. Suddenly they're delisted from Google, they're delisted from YouTube, or they're closed down on YouTube, Twitter. They then have to go through this whole bureaucratic process to say, look, no, there is nothing. This article is not. It's not breaching copyright, it's not breaching all these other rules and regulations, that India has used all these special tactics to try and stop these articles being printed. And we see this all over the independent media, people like ourselves who are trying to get a message to the community, and not just the community, but to the wider world, saying this is what is happening in India. India is not what you believe it is. It is not what you are told by Indian media it is. It is, and the government is. I've got a lot of admiration for India, but it hurts me to see a government that is so not acting in India's best interest, not the people of India. It's acting in the best interests of a small community, a small number of people. And the tools that they use to do that, and the media is one of its biggest tools, it stains what people like I do. It stains this profession, and it upsets me. And that's just on the media side and the journalistic side. But of course, it extends into every other element. It extends into the real world. So if there are rallies, if there are public gatherings of people wanting to discuss these issues, it's always under a threat. There is always this implied threat. People in any democracy should not feel threatened to speak their mind. And there is a very often quoted phrase that we certainly use in Western democracies, which is, I might not agree to what you say, but I will fight to the death to defend your right to say that, which is a very powerful statement. It's telling people, I don't agree with what you're saying, but I will always ensure that you have the right, the ability to say that freely and without fear. Because it could be me next time. If I don't like the government, if I feel the government is doing something very wrong, I want to always feel free to be able to criticise, to be able to hold that government to account. Because if you can't, you're in very, very dangerous territory. You're in 1930s Germany. And that, of course, is always held up as the big example across the world, but certainly in the West. Any control that comes from the state, everybody immediately refers back to that one tragic example of 1930s Germany, which is always held up as a very powerful example, because this is where things go very wrong, and it can go wrong very quickly before you realise it's suddenly too late. And the very decent people of Germany suddenly found themselves in a position that it was too late to change. So as soon as the warning signs happen, people are very quick to point them out. And we see this a lot with India. There are a lot of warning signs, and a lot of people are saying, look, these are warning signs. This is a very dangerous road that we're going down. And so we must always ensure that people anywhere in the world, particularly in India, but anywhere else, must be free to speak their mind. And we talk about transnational repression. This is a very scary thing that's happening now, that people, particularly in the Sikh community, who are the most vulnerable, there are a lot of campaigners, there are a lot of activists in the diaspora who are very vocal and very active, trying to highlight to the world what is happening in India, what is happening particularly to their community in India. And they live under the literal threat of their lives. What world do we live in where somebody in a democratic nation like Canada, the US, the UK, is afraid to speak up because they fear for their lives? What has happened that a foreign government, India, it could be anybody, it could be Russia, but we should not allow any government to intervene in a sovereign nation like the US, like Canada, like the UK, where an individual, particularly even an individual of that country, who is a citizen of that country, to stand up, speak their mind and criticise another country, they should not fear for their lives. And we've seen that in Canada with Nijar, we've seen it in the US with Gurpratwant Singh Pannoon, and of course potentially with Avtar Singh Kanda in the UK. So when I've discovered this as a white British person, it's so alien to what I'm used to. I was brought up in the UK. I'm used to I've almost taken for granted the Western democracy, my ability to stand up and criticise the government. And I am very vocal in my criticisms of the UK government, but I do that in the knowledge that I can do that safely and freely. I might get criticised and ostracised. That's okay, that's the punishment I get. But I can say it without fear. But now I start criticising India, suddenly even I, as a white British person, am starting to get nervous. What is happening that I, as I won't say independent journalist, I'm not independent, but as a journalist who is investigating and researching a very big topic, why am I finding myself nervous about doing it? Why do I feel under threat for doing this? Why do I start getting online, I start getting quite threatening comments? This should not happen. Now, critical comments, I welcome critical comments, intelligent, argued comments, and we get a lot of very good comments from Indians, from Hindus particularly, who argue very intelligently about what's wrong with what we do. I welcome that. Please, by all means, criticise, argue with me, saying, if I'm talking nonsense, tell me and explain to me why. Because for me, it's an education. I'm learning what's going on. I'm trying to be as objective as possible. But when that crosses that line into threats, and this is what's happening with the Sikh community.
Does it affect you? Psychologically, mentally?
It actually...
When they troll you?
No, it doesn't. Obviously it affects me to some degree in that it makes me think twice about what I do, and I'm very careful about what I do. But it actually affects me in a positive way. It means, okay, I will try and be as objective and as balanced as I can. Now, obviously, I have an agenda, and that agenda is I'm trying to get a narrative. I'm trying to get the truth out. I'm trying to tell the truth. But I also try to do it in as balanced a way and as more of an educational way. So when I'm criticised, by somebody in India who says, look, you know, what you're saying is not true. And I get a lot of, as I say, very intelligently argued comments, but I disagree with them fundamentally. And I like to have the opportunity to say, no, actually, no, what you're saying is wrong. And then I'd like to explain to them why. But it's because what you are told is actually not the truth. You know, I respect your opinion, but it is based on the information that you are being fed, and you are being fed that information from one side only. So I invite these people to listen to what we are saying at Satluj. We're giving another side. We're giving another option. Now, you don't have to believe us, because you might not think what we're saying is the truth. That's your prerogative. That is up to you. But at least please form your opinion based on a balanced argument. You've got both sides of the argument. Now you can form your opinion. And I will respect that opinion. You don't have to agree with us. So, but yeah, but does it affect me? Yes, it does. But it pushes me to be more persuasive, to try and influence these people in a positive way. So, look, no, your country is a magnificent country, and it's going in a direction that actually genuinely upsets me. And I would like to play my part in bringing it back into a direction, because the future of India is so great, it's so positive. The different cultures of India have so much to offer the world. We see it happening in so many different areas. But at the moment, the combined group of cultures, in my opinion, is going not in the right direction, under the direction of Narendra Modi. And as I say, it does upset me that.
So by now you must have known that how the Sikh people facing the problems like that after 100,000, near about 100,000 young Sikh guys killed in fake encounters, and before that, in November 1984, there was Sikh genocide.
Yeah.
So you researched a lot when you put the stories on board and for the review and for telecast, final telecast. You a lot of research on the particular subjects on Indian politics and Punjab politics, Sikh politics, and Punjabi diaspora. So, what do you think about the present situation of the Sikh psyche they are going through?
It's, I mean, the first thing I would say was 1984. Wow. I mean, when I researched that story, I knew very, very little about it. So when I researched it, it really shook me, actually. The tragedy, and it wasn't just the attack on the temple. It was the whole, everything that happened that year. It was the murder, the plain simple murder of so many people at the temple in itself was bad enough. It was a genocide later in the year that was just unforgivable. I mean, even to me as an objective observer, I read about this and it brought tears to my eyes. It even upsets me now when I think about it. So I felt very, very motivated to tell that story. So we put a very powerful, I hope, series of videos, which our audience do watch, about all the events around that period. And then, of course, after that period, what followed was equally shocking, and again, but was equally suppressed. It was buried. It didn't make the news in the West, again, because of this tightly controlled message from India. And the hundreds of thousands of, the whole generation of young Sikhs that were disappeared, that were just murdered again in the Punjab, it was a period of history that was just shocking. And it certainly, if you look at global events over certainly the last few centuries, that stands out again as one of those very few events that genuinely shocks people today. And of course, with that history, it's not surprising that a community still feels it today, because of course so many relatives of people alive today were impacted directly of that, and there are young people now whose parents and grandparents were directly affected by those events, and of course they have been told the stories through the families. So it's encouraging in a very positive way that those events and importantly those emotions are transmitted through each generation. And it's important that the young generation particularly understand what happened, that they understand it's not just a story and it's not just a historic story. They understand the impact, the emotional impact it had on families, on the community as a whole. Because it's that emotion that ensures that that story carries forward. It ensures that people are motivated to make things happen, to change things. So I think it's very important that the young generation understand and that we have our responsibility to educate the young generation, and in turn the young generation have a responsibility. And of course they've got a lot of distractions in life, particularly in the diaspora. It's a very exciting world. I mentioned at the beginning that we live in a 24/7 world where things change very quickly. So there's a lot of distractions. But I hope that they feel this responsibility to ask the questions, to ask their parents, their grandparents, what happened? Tell me about it. Let me understand why it was so important. Because we're giving this generation, this young generation, a very important responsibility. It's a very big burden for them to carry, but it's an important burden they carry as part of their culture and their heritage. We're passing you this message that you must take this message forward, and your generation must act on it and keep passing that message down, so that firstly those events never happen again, but secondly we can rectify the injustices through, whether it's through legal means, through democratic means, through all these means that we have talked about at great length in many different areas, so that they can change things. And our generation, of course your generation in the community, are doing everything that they can to make things happen. Mm-hmm. But of course the young have this responsibility, this shared responsibility as well, because of course, in 20, 30 years, these guys are going to be you are the next leaders. It's your responsibility to continue this forward so that it doesn't get forgotten about. And it's in many cultures, not just the Sikh culture, but in many cultures in the modern world, it's very easy to lose that culture. It's very easy to lose the culture. The Western culture is very, it has this habit of sucking tradition and heritage out of many cultures, Islamic, Sikh, all these very ancient cultures. It's very easy to get seduced by Western culture. Yeah. And it's very important that we don't lose those cultures, that the communities retain those cultures. But one of the most important core
beauty of this world, that very diverse and very kind of secular kind of that. Yeah. You have to respect everybody's faith and everybody's opinion, particularly.
Yeah. Well, this comes back to one of the fundamentals of democracy, is that Western democracies respect diverse cultures. That every culture has a voice. Every culture has a right to exist freely and without fear. We certainly have it in the UK. We have a very diverse population in the UK. It's definitely here in the US and of course in Canada. And this is why it contrasts so strongly with what's happening in India, because the events that are occurring in India is this wonderful diversity. Things are changing. These minorities are being pushed to the margins more and more. It's becoming harder, from what I've learned, it's becoming harder to practice these cultures because of the growth of the strength of the Hindu majority is pushing, as driven by the government. They're driving these different diverse cultures to the margins, and that to me is at the cost of India. I think it's a very tragic thing.
Mm-hmm. So Sikh people are struggling for a statehood and for their homeland. We can say Khalistan. When you report wherever in the world for a particular struggle of people, then it's sometimes you feel very, very suppressed, and you have fears in your mind, and you prepare yourself to tackle that particular problems. So your Do you feel sometimes your inclination towards that particular community?
The Khalistan community.
Yeah.
Yes, I do, and it comes back to what I was saying earlier about injustice, because when we look historically,
Sentimentally.
sentimentally, because I think the passion that the community has for Khalistan is I feel it. I feel it. You look at the rallies throughout the diaspora, throughout the referendum. You only need to look at the pictures that come from every venue where they hold the referendum. You see this. You see the community uniting. You see the sea of yellow flags. It's very moving. It is. It's very motivating to see that, and it's brought home to me how motivated the community is towards Khalistan. And I think it's
in that particular time, your news content flagged all on the social network, banned in India. Even BBC documentary about Modi also banned in India.
Yeah.
And big media houses banned in India. There is totally blackout, and in that particular time, in that era, we are working for the particular cause, and you are one of them. How you feel? How your guts?
I actually feel very positive about the whole thing, because one thing that shocked me actually was discovering in India that any talk of secessionism, independence, Khalistan, it's a criminal offence. And I come from a country in the UK where we recently had a referendum for Scotland, the independence of Scotland, and it was a very emotional referendum. There's a lot of anger, a lot of arguments, a lot of campaigning, but it was still a democratic right for the Scottish people to demand their independence. As it turned out, they voted no. But when I discovered that in India, the same scenario where a region, the Punjab, they are not just denied the right to self-determination, they're not even allowed to campaign or discuss it. It's illegal to do that. That is so contrary to any democratic fundamental right. If any part of any democratic nation decides, I want to be free, they should be given that opportunity to be able to campaign for it, to vote for it, and the government should respect the outcome of that. Self-determination is a fundamental right for anybody in a democratic nation, and they are denied that in India. So, in the diaspora, what I see a very powerful and a growing movement. This is what's really encouraging. There is a very growing movement towards this whole concept of Khalistan. And it encourages me. It's a self-perpetuating thing, because the more I see that more people are becoming engaged, more people are joining the ranks, it encourages me to say, actually, this is a campaign worth fighting for. Because clearly, a lot of people want this. A lot of people in the community want this. You only need to look at who turns up to the referendum. I can't even. It would be interesting to see the results, but I think I would bet a large amount of money what the result will be. Because in my mind, there is no doubt the community want an independent Khalistan. It's to me that I have no doubt about it. I think a lot of the community are not necessarily actively engaged in the campaign, because, like in any community, in any topic, most people are not interested in politics. They're just interested in their day-to-day lives, living their life, going to their job, feeding their family. That's all they care about. Politics is just somewhere in the background. But given the opportunity to vote for something, everybody has an opinion. And everybody in the community will have an opinion on Khalistan.
Everybody should have an equal chance to...
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they should be given that gift, that democratic gift, to voice that opinion. And this is why the referendum, even though it's unofficial, is really important, because it's sending a message to India. Look, if you give people the democratic right, you claim you're a democracy, give these people the democratic right so their voice can be heard. And you have to respect that. You cannot deny that right. And so, yeah, I have no doubt that even though a large percentage of the community are, shall we say, indifferent to the concept, only because they have more important things in their lives. But if they are given that opportunity to vote, I am still pretty confident that the large majority of them will go towards Khalistan. And I think, again, it's for many reasons. One, it's because of the heritage. Two, it's because of the culture. But three, I think it's the most exciting opportunity for the community to really change things for the better within the Punjab. Because the whole premise of Khalistan, and I've talked to so many people, and one of my standard questions is, what will Khalistan bring the world? And it brings so much positivity. It brings not just a culture that is so embracing, embracing of diversity. And I'll go on a quick tangent here. One of the things about the Sikh religion that really appealed to me, unlike most other religions where they have an active agenda to convert people to that religion, the Sikh religion is, no, I respect your religion, but my purpose is to make you a better Christian, make you a better Muslim, make you a better Jain, or whatever it is, which is very different to most other religions, actually. And that's a very important fundamental point, because it means that like the original empire, it welcomed people of all cultures, of all religions. They were welcome in the Sikh empire, and they were given equal voice. That everybody was treated as equal. There was no preferential treatment, and that's the power of Khalistan. It means the new Khalistan, if and when it happens, it means, and a lot of criticisms comes, well, and I get this in comments from the videos that I talk about Khalistan. Oh, they will push the Hindus out. What about the poor Hindus? You're not understanding the whole basic premise of Khalistan. They will be equally as welcome in Khalistan. And even if the Sikhs are a minority, it doesn't matter. It's all about an independent nation that is equal to all religions and all cultures and all types of people.
Angus, you are more Khalistani than me.
But I believe in it. I see the good it can bring the world. And then that's even before we talk about the political side of it. Because politically, it sits in a very strategic location, strategically for the locality, domestically speaking, but also from a global perspective. Now, from a regional perspective, it sits between two independent nuclear powers.
In between, yeah. It can be a buffer state, yeah.
Exactly this.
To save the people from nuclear war, yeah.
Yeah, so you've got India and Pakistan, both nuclear armed, both have had a very
even
fractious...
China is also
Exactly.
power,
Exactly. I mean, you've got China as another overbearing threat from the north. So, yeah, you've got two very close neighbours who have had a very fractious relationship for many years, which very quickly spills into something worse. So if you can have a buffer zone that would be Khalistan, it immediately separates two potentially warring nations. So that in itself is really important. It creates a basis for trade. It creates trade routes for in two different directions. It forms a hub that can be a very powerful economic hub, but to the benefit of all its neighbours. And then on a wider scale, on a bigger picture, it's a strategic ally for Western democracies. So India can do what it wants. Now, we all want India to move back towards a democratic principle. We don't want India to become the next China or the next North Korea. And unfortunately, it seems to be heading in that direction. India has very close ties with Moscow, historically. Okay, but that's not a great future, in our opinion, in the West. That is not a good future for India. We are trying to bring India as an ally. We want India as an ally. But if you're not, we need Khalistan, because we need that powerful hub in the region to help to balance that region against the forces of China, etc. Now, it may be small in geographical terms, but it will come with the support of many Western nations. It will come with the support of the US, the UK, hopefully Europe. And that's a very powerful support, because again it's a base of operations. Should a regional conflict happen, it means immediately for the West there is this base immediately from which the defence of democracy can happen in that region. So, but as I say, there are so many different aspects to the benefits of Khalistan, and I can't think of any negatives about it, because we've talked about India and the Hindu majority. Now, the direction of the Indian government is, as directed by the RSS, is this Hindu Rashtra.
They have something wrong in their mind, particularly about Khalistan and Sikh people. But most of the people love the Sikhs.
Yeah.
And if they're talking about Hindu Rashtra, so, it's good for them. Then they have to work on the
Yeah.
particular subject. But they don't stop a pure state like Khalistan.
Yeah, and this is a very important point, and actually it gives me the opportunity to address many comments that I get, is that why are we being so divisive? You know, I'm a Hindu and I've got lots of Sikh friends, you know, we all mix perfectly well together. Yes, of course you do. And we want that to continue. We're not the ones being divisive. What we are trying to do is get the message across that it's the Indian government that are being divisive. They are the ones driving the wedge between the communities, between the Hindus and the Muslims, between the Hindus and the Sikhs, where before there were no divisions, because you know the Indians all generally speaking get on very well together. They're all integrated. There were no real big divisions before, but those divisions are happening now, and what we're trying to do is to stop those divisions. Look, no, we know all the communities get on well together, but your government, with its RSS-driven agenda, is trying to divide those communities. Now, that's one thing, but then we come on to, okay, so if the RSS is driving this Hindu nationalism towards a Hindu Rashtra, okay, if that is the direction that you want to go in, and we respect that, if that is your democratic right, if you vote that you want a Hindu Rashtra, then in the same breath, you can then not deny Khalistan. You cannot deny the Sikhs to have the same. So if you want your Hindu Rashtra, then why not give the Sikhs their own area, their own region of Khalistan, and then you can coexist quite amicably in the future, if that's what you want. And then all the other regions, you've got to give them the opportunity. If they want to go independent, you've got to give them that opportunity. So you can't have both. If you want a Hindu Rashtra, you can't expect all the other communities to live under your hammer. That's not fair. You've got to allow them to leave and set up their own regions. So that the message is very simple. You can't have it both ways. But by all means, have your Rashtra, but you've then got to respect the other communities as well. So, and they, of course, the other communities will be delighted to help you have your Hindu Rashtra. So.
Yeah, exactly. Anything in your mind you want to say, you want to share with our viewers?
I think my experience over the last year has been a really exciting, enjoyable, but very emotional journey, and I've become particularly engaged with everything that we do here because, as I said, it's appealed to me at an emotional level. It's appealed to me on so many levels. It's, as I say, it's not just a job. This for me, it's become a passion. It's become a vocation. There is a goal here. We have this whole story of Khalistan. If I see Khalistan happen in my lifetime, I will feel so happy. I will feel that in my small way I've helped push the community towards a fabulous goal, towards a goal that it's life-changing, it's changing the world, it's a legacy that all of us could leave that would have such a beneficial impact on the world. So yeah, my experience over this last year has been a very powerful one, and I really hope it continues in the same vein for a long time.
Your eyes are shining.
Yeah.
Right, talking about the positiveness of Khalistan. Yeah, thank you very much to be with us. Yeah, I'm very much. I feel good. Yes.
Well, it's been
here with us. Yeah.
It's been a pleasure from my side, and I have to thank you particularly, Surinder, for all your support and everything that you've done for me as well. And thank you to Satluj TV.
You're welcome. See you again. Yeah.
Indeed. Thank you.
ਸੋ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਐਂਗਸ ਸਕੌਟ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ, ਸਾਡੇ UK ਦੇ ਬਿਊਰੋ ਹੈਡ ਨੇ ਸਤਲੁਜ TV ਦੇ। ਸਾਨੂੰ ਵਧੀਆ ਲੱਗਾ ਇਹ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਸਾਡੀ ਅੱਗੇ ਤੋਂ ਅੱਗੇ ਸ਼ੇਅਰ ਕਰੋ। ਵੀ ਆਰ ਔਨ Roku TV, Apple TV and Amazon Fire TV, and you can watch us on www.satlujnetwork.tv and our various social network platforms. Thank you very much. ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ। ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।
Great.
Salute to you.